Hello again, everyone. We begin today talking about wildfires, which impacted several counties in Oklahoma this past week. We want to revisit a conversation with our OSU Extension beef cattle specialist, Dr. Dave Lalman and Dr. Rosslyn with some tips on caring for injured animals.
It's very important in these kind of disaster type situations that animal welfare needs to be our first consideration. And how those animals that have survived, are they first of all going to be able to recover from those injuries? And in many cases, unfortunately, euthanasia may be the most humane decision that we have to make. I've been in contact with producers and veterinarians in that area, and they're assessing that situation. They're out in the pastures taking a look there. And that's top of mind is the care and welfare of these animals. And although we're beef cattle specialists, we do have other animals that need to be considered. Certainly our other livestock, as well as our pets, when we're talking about these kind of situations and things that we can see on down the road. We need to make sure that we're keeping these animals hydrated. We need to be handling them very, very carefully with stockmanship and welfare focused on those handling of those animals. And then we need to be thinking about long-term repercussions. Wildfires, associated thermal injuries, burns can be a big issue on these animals. We also need to be thinking about smoke inhalation and the systems that those affect, whether that be the airways and lungs, or whether that be the heart, or even, we've dealt, Dr. Lalman has mentioned, we've got cows that are very well into their pregnancies, and thinking about their capacity to take care of either calves on the ground or calves that they will have in short order. And so we want to make sure we're monitoring those animals very, very closely, providing them the supportive care that is appropriate, and again, making those decisions focused on animal welfare if we have to make some hard choices.
What are the two different options of feed at this time with the situation?
They could feed around 8 pounds of that. They have to feed it every day, but they can feed up to 8 pounds, and that will minimize weight loss to about 3/4 of a pound a day. Okay. And yes, getting hay into that program as soon as possible is better, safer, but 8 pounds of that 14% feed will get them by for a while. Secondly, a real simple thing to do is to limit feed about 10 pounds of hay to these heavy pregnant cows and feed 5 pounds of the 30% or so supplement they already have in their overhead bins. 10 pounds of hay, 5 pounds of supplement, no weight loss. I mean, that works. They have to figure out how to limit feed the hay. Now, I say limit feed the hay because I'm assuming it's going to be limited in, access.
When we're dealing with these immediate feed needs and injuries, it is also important to think about the documentation piece of this.
Absolutely. Being part of other disaster responses, it is something oftentimes that we forget in the immediate days following the disaster. And so having documentation becomes very, very important. From a financial aspect, it can be as simple in many cases as, if we have losses, documenting those with photographic evidence. Most people have the capacity with their cell phones, with their smartphones, to take pictures that can be time-stamped. For many programs, emergency type programs, it's going to be necessary to have verifiable records. And so producers need to be thinking about their existing records and then creating a line of documentation as they're dealing with losses on a day-to-day basis, of making sure that they are documenting those appropriately should emergency funds become available to producers.
For those with livestock casualties needing to dispose of carcasses, guidance now from Dr. Doug Hamilton, OSU Extension Waste Management Specialist.
Basically, the state has 5 methods that you can dispose of your livestock. Landfilling, rendering, incineration, composting, and burial. And burial is really your only option. The first thing I would do would get in contact with your local conservation district and they can help you find spots to bury the animals on your farm.
So start with the Conservation District. What do I need to do when I contact them?
Well, if you already have a management plan, they'll know your farm. Otherwise, they'll come out to your farm and kind of look over the land, look in the soil surveys, and figure out where's a good place to bury an animal.
And there really is some specific guidance there. Go over that.
Yes, you need to be in a high spot. You need to be well above a floodplain. You're going to have to dig a hole 4 to 6 feet deep, and you need to be about 2 feet, at least 2 feet above where the water table may rise. Really, there's going to be 1 or 2 spots on a fairly large ground that you could actually do the burial in.
And it's going to take some heavy equipment more than likely, and some logistics planning too.
Yeah, you're going to have to think ahead because it's not easy to move 100 to 1,000, 1,500 pound animal. So you're going to need like a box loader or a bucket loader. Also, you're going to have to dig a pretty deep hole, so you're going to need a backhoe.
And I'm sure producers we know that they lose animals from time to time, an adult animal or calves, of course, but when there's mass casualty like this, it really does require some extra planning and coordination and asking for support.
Yeah, when you can still use burial, you can dig a trench as long as you need, put the cows like tail to nose, in that trench, not quite touching each other. But if you have 20 cows dead, that can be a pretty large trench. You might need to be able to dig 2 or 3. Yeah, there's 2 specific fact sheets, one on proper disposal of animals, which covers all the 5 methods, and then one specifically on composting of animals.
As you are handling these and other very stressful details related to the disaster, a reminder to care for yourself and look out for others. Here's Dr. Amy Hagerman.
So it's important to understand not just how to check in on our own mental health, but also to check in on the mental health of others. And that begins by assuring safety, of course, first and foremost, physical safety, making sure the person has some reassurance. We're not pushing anyone to talk about something that's incredibly stressful to them at the time, but making sure they know that we're open to having those conversations and knowing the resources that we have available in the state that they can reach out to for help if they're going through an incredibly stressful time. We've got some great resources that we've put together through the Disaster Assistance Response Team to help people navigate some of these situations, whether it's mental health first aid for themselves or mental health first aid for somebody else that they know and love.